And then on your left, we have Tim Colen, Executive Director, San Francisco Housing Action Coalition. In the middle, Sara Shortt, Executive Director, SF Housing Rights Committee. And Calvin Welch right here, who's going to do the slideshow, the founder of the Council of Community Housing Organizations. Welcome all of you. Thank you so much for being here. And take it away, Calvin.
Thank you very much. As we get started, I'd like to try to go through some fundamental and basic facts that are not my facts. They're the Department of City, mainly the Department of City Planning's facts. The first thing that it's important to understand is physical restraints that we face as a city. This is from 1997. It hasn't changed that much, although the eastern neighborhoods, the development of the eastern neighborhoods has meant that there's now a little bit more land for residential development and less industrial land. But just to get an idea about density, the big issue across the country, in terms of human density, USA has 79 people per square mile. California has 217 people per square mile. San Francisco has 16,000 people per square mile. In terms of land area, in 1996, there's 46.7 square miles on 49 in San Francisco. Net land for public open space parks, government buildings, 12.25 square miles. Net land area for all development is 23 square miles in San Francisco, of which 12.9 square miles is zoned for residential development. So we're talking about 13 square miles and creating housing in 13 square miles. That's a fact that has profound significance on our choices. Between 1960 and 2010, we built almost 50% more housing units than our population increased. A well-kept secret in San Francisco, that is to say, the population increased by about 64,000 people between 1960 and 2010, and we built 91,000 housing units in that same period. This is the same data in graphic form. Top is unit change, bottom is unit change, top is population change. You can see that it stayed roughly parallel. This is from the fourth quarter of 2013 from the Department of City Planning. We have 50,400 units in the pipeline, either entitled, under construction, or approved. Not quite the picture of a dawdling planning system and a NIMBY-ish city. 50,400 units in the pipeline is a significant number of units. As I say, these are not my numbers. This is from the Department of City Planning. This is take a look at construction pace by decade. 67 to 76, we averaged 1,600 units a year during that decade. Between 07 and 12, we are averaging very nearly 1,900 units. Since 1912, it's north of 2,000, very far north of 2,000 units a year. This is a very important fact. The red line are the market rate units that have been in fact produced between 2000 and 2009. The blue line is the ABAG targets to meet our housing needs. So we are producing way more market rate housing than our quote-unquote needs are. Why? Because we have, this is the same color scheme. Red is what we produce, blue is the target. This is the target for low and moderate low and moderate income priced units, we are far behind our targets for that. So we overbuild market rate housing and we underbuild affordable housing for low and moderate income people by dramatic numbers. This is, again, from a study done by the Department of City Planning. The light blue is the actual cost per square foot of development of residential development in San Francisco, and the blue by housing type is the sales price. So although we're told constantly that San Francisco is an extraordinarily expensive place to produce housing, and it is, the market is producing housing at prices way beyond cost. Extraordinarily beyond cost. And as you can see, the taller the building, the more dense the building is, the more profitable it is. And the less affordable it is. This is an interesting graph that I wrote a paper about. The top line is the Zillow measured condo value, and the bars are the number of units produced each quarter. As you can see, oddly enough, I'm not saying that this is a causal relationship. I'm just simply saying this is a spatial relationship. As production goes up, cost goes up. As production drops, cost drops. As production goes back up, costs go up. So something else than supply and demand is at work in San Francisco in terms of setting housing prices. In the 41 of the 65 quarters in the previous slide, housing production increased over the previous quarter, yet in 44 of those quarters, condo prices increased. During this period covered by the graph, condo prices increased by 288%, from 268,000 to 775. One of the main reasons for that is this mistaken notion that the only source of housing that sets price is new construction, which totally ignores the 370,000 units we have in San Francisco, in which in any given year, 5,000 units are for sale of existing housing. And we never produce more than 2,500 units in a year. So it's absurd to think that we can build our way to lower prices when what sets housing price is the sale of existing housing in San Francisco, overwhelming. As you can see, between 2000 and 2012, on average, there were 5,200 yearly sales of existing housing and only 1,942 yearly sales of new construction. So it's a great myth to believe that new construction, by increasing new construction, even tripling, that we will even equal the number of units being sold from existing housing stock, which really does set price in San Francisco. It's not new construction that sets price. It's the sale of existing homes. This is where we're supposed to build the new housing. And as you can see, I'm sorry, it's a little blurry. You're not going blind. I'm not going blind, it's just blurry. As you can see, this graph from the housing element of the city planning department says that we have the capacity to build 73,000 units. Remember, we had 50,000 in the pipeline. This is if you rezone everything to its maximum. We could build 73,000 units without covering McLaren Park and Golden Gate Park and the GGNRA, which, believe me, will be proposed at some point. We have basically neighborhood commercial districts being the principal area where there's going to be a great expansion of housing density. Get ready for it. What has worked in San Francisco that has kept whatever middle class or working class we have, has been the growth since the mid-70s of price restrictions on housing. Total number of units in 2011, 372,000. Section 8 units in 2011, 9,600. Public housing units, 6,200. Residential hotel rooms, all of which prices are controlled, 18,000. Permanently affordable housing units, 28,000 have been built. BMRs, 13,000. Rent-controlled units, 172,000. Thus, 237,000 units, 64% of San Francisco's housing stock, is under some form of price controls. And to the degree that we still have a middle class in this town, to the degree that we still have working people in this town, it is because of those price controls in that 64% of the housing. Remove those price controls, move that housing onto the market, and you will price more San Franciscans out of the city. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Calvin. Sarah, do you want to speak for the FC?
Ooh.
There, that's better.
How long do we have?
I think you have 7 minutes, is that correct?
Okay, no.
7 to 10.
7 to 10?
7 to
Okay.
10. Okay, so forgive my technological assistance here, but I couldn't get it to print. And then I figured, hey, I could Google something if I didn't know the answer to one of your questions. I actually wanted to start just reading some things I found. I saw them before, but I realized how useful they would be for tonight's discussion. I don't think it's anything people aren't aware of, but I just wanted to, after that light, I can't read so well, but here's something from the Chronicle, and this is a real estate agent talking. The rental market is driven by hiring, and companies, companies don't hire as much in the winter. They're talking about the change. But landlords are still getting extremely, ridiculously high rents. People making $85,000 to $100,000 a year are being hired like wildfire now at tech companies, and they can afford junior one-bedrooms and micro apartments for about $2,500 a month. You have to make 3 times a monthly rent to qualify, so even for a $2,000 studio, you have to make over $70,000 a year. Another real estate person, when you go to open houses, they are zoos, packed full of people lined up, money in hand, who are willing to pay 10% over asking. Again, I think you're probably all pretty aware of this. Another real estate person is talking about the 1/3 rule, where people are required to make 3 times their income, 3 times the rent in income. And this person saying, for many high-tech workers, it's not a problem. If that is 1/3 of your income, you need to earn around $8,700 a month or $105,000 a year to afford it. That is like a high-tech worker. And then another person is talking about our standards. They need to make 3 times the rent in monthly income. She's saying, you would think we need to go above that, but we often haven't needed to. The people coming into the city to apply for our apartments are making huge salaries, all 6 digits, she says. It's insane, and I'm the first to admit it. So you get the idea. Just a little bit of context of what's happening right now, why it's happening. I'm not going to go too into sort of the reasons why our rents are so high. Our eviction rate is increasing. But sort of my pitch here tonight is about the importance in the whole mix of affordable housing solutions in preserving our existing affordable housing stock, which, as Calvin pointed out, is, for the most part, or a huge chunk of it, is our rent-controlled housing. Calvin can, since he's here, he can talk all about affordable housing development and production and how to create more. I work for a tenants' rights organization. I am seeing the loss of rent-controlled housing stock left and right over the past years, and just increasing with drastic rates, and it absolutely fits into this puzzle of how we deal with the affordable housing crisis in San Francisco, and also what is fueling it. let me see, sorry about that. So I'm going to start with some numbers. Ellis Act evictions have doubled in the last year, and in the last successive 3 years, and they've quadrupled in the last 5 years. There's no sign of decline in this either. All evictions are on the rise. I know Delene from the Rent Board is here, and she can attest to that, but there's been a 38% increase from last year, and they're at the highest level since 2001. Rents here are the highest in the nation now. We're #1. And they've increased by 15% just in the last year alone. According to the Legislative Analyst's Office, it's the city number crunchers basically, we're seeing a loss of 1,000 rental units from the market permanently per year. They're just being removed. And then there's the issue of the corporate and vacation rentals that are taking estimates from 6 to 10,000 units. Some are saying 14. I mean, it's a crazy number that we're seeing right now that are lost, and they're rent-controlled housing, right? So we have to consider what this means in the context of this extremely tight market and, the challenges we have with limited land to build on, and an already existing affordable housing crisis. I mean, when I moved here in, I don't know, 98 or whatever, it was already a very expensive place to live. We were in a housing crisis in 1979, and that's why people organized so hard to pass rent control. So we already have these challenges, and problematically, when you already have that situation, and you add this type of things to it, which is a loss of the very precious affordable housing resource we have to the mix, it just gets that much worse. So some have claimed, that the number of Ellis Act evictions are insignificant, or that because they're not yet at the extremely high rates of that first boom, that it's therefore not a crisis. I've heard people say that, particularly the apartment association. Here's the thing about the Ellis Act evictions, and this is why we're focusing so heavily on them, because some people say, well, they're a small percentage, why do you care so much? It absolutely relates to this, their role in the affordable housing crisis at large, which is that when people are Ellis evicted, we lose that unit from our rent-controlled housing stock permanently. It does not come back online. And so then we're faced with an all the more limited pool of affordable housing. And this, same numbers competing for that very limited pool, which pushes the rents up and causes incentive for eviction, other types of evictions. What's worse about the Ellis Act, too, is that it tends to be buildings where there are vulnerable populations, seniors, disabled, folks who are on very low incomes, fixed incomes. And so when they are evicted, and we not only do we lose that unit, but the rents being so high as they are, they're then thrown again into that pool for the types of housing Calvin pointed to, Section 8 public housing. Affordable housing is the only housing they can then get into or afford. All of this is to say that we have to consider preserving our precious affordable rent-controlled housing stock as a key part of any solution to solving our housing crisis. There's no question that we need to create more units that are affordable to those who the market will simply not build for. But if the little we can produce is basically only going to backfill the numbers we're losing out the back door through this loss of rent-controlled housing, then we only break even. And will not get a net gain, and will not even be making a dent in the problem. So that's how very important this is in the equation. And before Tim here takes the build baby build approach that new construction will lift all boats, and I won't speak for you, but
Go ahead.
I know you're going that. I just want to caution that we need to think long and hard on the impact that new construction has on our rent-controlled stock. These things don't happen in a vacuum, and so it's observable, especially I'm sure you see in Potrero Hill, you see in many neighborhoods throughout the city that. But it's also well documented that in fact rents go up when high-end housing is constructed in the adjacent areas. And when rents go up, evictions increase. So we can't simply think that to build will, trickle down and help solve this problem of the loss of affordable rent-controlled units. In fact, it can create that problem. So we can't look to a solution that actually exacerbates the crisis in other ways. Now, what can we do to stop this part of the loss of affordable housing? I'm not sure how much time I have, but I want to point to a few things, which is the reform of the Ellis Act, as you've heard me talk about, the great problem with the Ellis Act. Today, it's exciting news today. The bill that's in Sacramento that's sponsored by Assemblymember Leno, actually, Senator, actually passed, and it's out of committee, is that right, Brad? Yeah. So people were down there lobbying and organizing today, and we're actually making some progress. So that's a huge step, and we're all locally working on that. But we've also identified some ways locally to try to tackle this problem, and also to mitigate the impact. The least we can do is, help people deal with the terrible nightmare that it is to be evicted in this housing market. So some examples really quickly, giving increased relocation assistance to Ellis Act victims. This happened with Supervisor Campos's bill just passed. Giving tenants a right to purchase when their building is being sold or converted to condos. Restricting the use of fractionalized loans. This is something that's actually facilitated TIC conversions of rent-controlled housing into TICs. And something that we're all, a few of us are working together here on, anti-speculator tax, which would actually tax the profits made when somebody goes in, buys a building and flips it really quickly just to make enormous profits. So those are just some examples. Hopefully in the question and answer period I can share some more. Thanks for hearing me.
Thank you for having me tonight. I run the Housing Action Coalition. Our mission is to advocate for the creation of well-designed, well-located housing at all levels of affordability for San Franciscans present and future. I would hope that while there's not much we agree on, I hope what we could agree that we agree on with Calvin and Sara is that it would be our view that the extreme housing affordability crisis we're facing now, which is it's unprecedented and it's awful, has made San Francisco a city distinctly hostile to our young, new families, entry-level workers, civil servants, seniors, immigrants, the creative class, and the risk to them, the fact that they're being forced out brutally on pricing, indicates the great peril to the future character of our city. I would say there are three reasons that we're experiencing this housing crisis. First one is the planet's urbanizing. People are moving to cities. This is not just San Francisco, it's across the United States and the world. The advantages that accrue to living in cities, economic and cultural, are driving this, and it's a huge force that can't really be stopped. This is the new way the world works. The second thing is San Francisco has been blessed to be one of the really, really hot economies. It's an innovation hub. And you can see it now. There's enormous flows of venture capital that are shifting from Silicon Valley to the city. And the housing problems we have are the flip side of the coin of having an economy that's the envy of any city in the United States. The third reason doesn't look very good for us. What we're seeing now is the logical and predictable consequence of 2 generations of restricting housing production. In the world I inhabit, in the blogosphere and on professional papers, and in particular among urban economists and urban planners, San Francisco is getting a reputation as the city not to emulate if you're interested in housing affordability. We have processes and rules in place that no other city has in the United States. Could I, if I could impose show of hands, how many homeowners in the audience? Renters. Okay, thank you. Calvin's paper I love. I try to publicize it every chance I get because I'm not sure what a spatial relationship is as opposed to an economic one, but it seems to document something that's never been observed in a Western economy before, that if we increase the supply of housing, Well, the prices are increased. I'll say that again. Increasing the supply of something increases its price. I don't know how to respond to that. And some of the other things in there, I haven't had a chance to pour through the data, but it seems to suggest this one that keeps coming back, that we produce more housing than there are people. It's implying somehow that there's thousands of empty units because there aren't enough people to fill them, which I'm not sure exactly how that works. We're terrible at producing housing. Seattle, a city to which we're often compared, is a tech hub, land constrained, built around water, hot economy, year in, year out, for decades has produced double the amount of housing. Calvin showed you some of the figures. In our world, we're interested in annual production of housing. And I'll preface by saying in our 15 years, we've never, ever taken a position for or against rent control, TICs, LSAC, the whole other thing. It's a scorched earth. You can't make any difference on it. We focus on production of new housing. And we think that this is absolutely the time to do it. One of the elephants in the room I never hear discussed is what are employment projections for San Francisco? I mean, we've got this gross imbalance of housing supply and demand, and anybody who's opened a newspaper knows it, or read the ads or seen the real estate ads. You know for yourself that what you're seeing is a market that's way distorted. And I'd have to say that the market is operating efficiently. It's allocating a scarce resource according to price. And this question of employment projections, which is kind of shorthand for saying, what's the demand for housing going to be? It looks really strong. And that's the part of the argument I don't see addressed here, is that, God bless, San Francisco's economy is going to continue to attract many, many thousands of high-skill, high-compensation workers who figured out that we have glorious weather and restaurants and are prepared to come here and compete for housing on price. Now you can say the market doesn't work or supply doesn't supply and demand doesn't work, but it just seems, in the world we inhabit, this is what you got. And we're not doing a very good job. This question of increasing housing, I suppose you could look at it two ways. There's the economic issue about supply and demand and increasing housing, and to us, it's trivial and it's not worth discussing. This is not to say that increasing housing supply makes housing cheap again in San Francisco. That, of course, left the barn a while ago. But what we've been seeing for the last few years is 10 to 20% price appreciation annually. And if that continues, it's kind of game over. San Francisco is going to have a very different look and feel to it in the future. And we've got to figure out, as much as anything, you can't just look at City Hall and say, these supervisors and the mayor, they're bad people. They're responding to the city. And there's a strong civic cultural bias in San Francisco that exists that says basically, San Francisco was perfect on the day I moved here. And if you change that, you hurt my city. That's not my city anymore. You can't change it. And that's sort of the reason why the Housing Action Coalition was formed, because for any residential development, any proposed in San Francisco, including low income and transitional age youth and all sorts of housing arrangements, affordable housing, permanently affordable housing, there'll always be people that get up and say, I'm not opposed to development. No. I support development, but this project is the wrong project for this location. It should be over there. And that's why we have work, that's why the Housing Coalition, Action Coalition exists, is we need, if the present circumstances are unacceptable, that the pricing of housing, where people are being brutally priced out of San Francisco, if that's not acceptable, this is what 30 to 40 years of failed housing policies has brought us. If we want something different, we're going to have to innovate and try different solutions. And there's not much going on right now. I can get into the Ellis Act it's at historic highs, right? No, it's not. It's way below the 2003-2004 peak. Ellis Act I think in the last calendar year for which there was, or the last year for which data are available, hit 216 per, and you saw that we've got something around 200,000, over 200,000, 270,000 price-controlled units. What is that? That's 0.1%. Is that what's driving this? Forget reforming LSAC. If it were to be repealed, would San Francisco become affordable again? Just no one I've talked to thinks so. They think that people are coming, they're well-compensated people, they want housing here, and they're prepared to pay the prices. We've seen this for 2 years. If you want a different outcome, enact different policies and make it more hospitable to housing.
Thank you, Tim. You've heard from our speakers. I'm just going to speak very briefly and just tell you that as bad as you think it is, it's actually worse. But there is some hope. And I want to agree or just comment on something Tim just said a minute ago, and that is that there is no one silver bullet. There's no one way to solve this problem. It's going to take work in several areas in preserving the existing affordable housing we have, creating more affordable housing, and building housing. But I want to just say, I've been around, I took a lot of economics in college, and I understand supply and demand, but there's a funny thing that happens in San Francisco. When rents are going up, people rent apartments for higher and higher prices. But sometimes there's other things they can do with that property that make even more money. And I'm sure we'll have a conversation in a minute about Airbnb. But if you rent an apartment, a one-bedroom apartment for $4,000 a month, you make about $50,000. You can rent that same apartment 24/7 as a hotel room and make about twice as much. So if you're thinking about the law of supply and demand, you have a resource, you make decisions about how you use that resource. A second one is you have people that are acting that are outside the market, both financially and politically. The Academy of Art University is one of my favorite subjects. I call it the Academy of Art Development Corporation. They are a real estate empire that kind of talks about being a for-profit school. But just to give you some sense of what they can do, they take in over $250 million a year in tuition. $250 million. 200 million of that is from us. It's taxpayer money for the student loans they collect once a year. That's cash. That's why they can buy dozens and dozens of residential apartment buildings in the city and convert them without permits to dorms, taking them off the market for everybody else. And yet they seem to be able to get along and do this for decades without being brought to any kind of justice. I have some theories about why that is, but we won't take time doing that now. And finally, I want you to think of these 3 words when people ask you what's wrong with the housing market. Global cash reserves. New York Times article recently said that what has happened in London, Manhattan, San Francisco is that housing isn't for housing anymore. If you have money in Russia, in Iraq, in Syria, and you're worried about what's going to happen to that, you make it liquid and you buy housing in cities and countries that have a stable political system, that are fairly conservative politically, that aren't going to change rapidly, and the real estate market's going up, and you park that money. And the article in the New York Times talked about a neighbor in London, I can't remember the name now, but there was a fairly wealthy woman who lived there and said, on my street where there's 20 houses, only 2 of them are being lived in. It's creating a ghost town. And a later article showed the inside of one owned by a Saudi prince, where they hadn't done anything to it for 20 years, and it looked like it had been blown up. The inside of it was just falling apart, because nobody was even bothering to take care of it. So this is happening more and more. So when you see buildings being built along in Rincon Hill, these $3, $5, $10 million condos, a lot of them are just second, third, fourth, fifth homes for people in a place where they're parking their cash to protect them. So that's not the supply and demand we've been talking about here, but it has a tremendous impact on the housing problems here. And finally, we used to have about $50 million a year from redevelopment tax increment to go into affordable housing. Now, we used to have money from the federal government and the state government. It is all gone. It's gone. Redevelopment, thanks to our governor, is gone. That money's gone, $50 million a year. We did pass a housing trust fund bill or initiative fairly recently, but it's not generating that much money yet, and most of it's going into preserving our public housing, which Calvin showed up here. There's quite a few units. But until we can come up with new sources, not just to replace that $50 million, but to double or triple it, we can't reach the 1/3 of the 6,000 or 5,000 units a year the mayor wants to build for the next 6 years. So unless we can answer The question, where's the new money coming from? We're not going to meet our goals. The good news is there's some unprecedented coalitions. As Sara mentioned, the Ellis Act bill to change that so that you can't just buy a piece of property, look at your watch, and 30 seconds later say, I'm tired of being in the residential housing business now, I want to Ellis Act it. You'll have to wait 5 years to discourage speculation. That did pass out of the second committee in the Senate on a 5-2 vote, and now goes to the full floor of the Senate. And that was supported by all of the usual suspects in the housing advocacy world, plus the Board of Supervisors, plus the mayor, plus I think it's up to 75 tech companies now that are starting to get involved in this issue because they need to. So there is a broad coalition out there. If we can push that coalition to support revenue for housing, particularly affordable housing in the Bay Area, I think we'll be in pretty good shape. So I'm going to stop there. And should we take questions from the audience?
Well, it's up to you. Do you want to ask questions?
Well, I see some hands up. So what I'm going to do is take questions, and if there's a lull in the questions, I'll ask a question.